My encounter took place in Spencer County, Indiana in July of 2010. I was working as a city police officer at the time and had recently moved in with a friend in the area. The house sat on several acres, mostly forested. Spencer County is a spooky place. My friends can attest to that. I've had all manner of unexplainable weirdness happen to me up there. My friend had been called away on business out of town, so I was on my own for a few days. I had been living in my new place for about 3 weeks, and it was my day off. I had been working third shift. I was up late trying to unpack the rest of my things and clean up the place a bit when I started getting an uneasy feeling of being watched. At first, I shrugged it off. I put my sidearm on my hip and I continued working. A few hours later, a decent-sized rock hit the front window. It didn't break the window, but I about jumped out of my skin. I retrieved my shotgun, stepped out onto the front porch, and I racked around in the chamber, figuring I was dealing with trespassers or meth heads. I saw him just inside the tree line, maybe 40 yards away. It was dark out, but the porch light was bright enough to see the large silhouette crouching down. And then he stood up. Now I'm about 5'8", and the porch is about 3 feet off the ground. And from what I could see, we were close to eye-to-eye level. My thought was, what is this big dude doing way out here in the middle of nowhere in the wee hours of the night? And then it dawned on me all at once what I was looking at. I was a veteran cop and had been in many dangerous situations. At that point in my life, not much of anything could rattle me. I couldn't say that anymore. I stood there wide-eyed and frozen, with my shotgun cradled in both arms and across my chest as he and I regarded each other. The few seconds of our encounter seemed to last for hours when he gave me a loud snort and then he retreated back into the woods. I could hear his departure as the limbs cracked. I think he was letting me know that he was leaving. And I never once felt threatened. I thought to aim my weapon at him, but I decided against it. I think he was just curious, and I don't think he wished me any harm. I went back into the house and thought about what I had seen. I didn't sleep at all that night. At first light, I decided to drive to my station and get my high-powered rifle from my patrol car just in case. On my way there, I saw a friend of mine. He's a county deputy, and he was sitting at a local gas station. I stopped to say hi, and he started telling me about his night. He had been looking for a large man in a ghillie suit prowling around my neck of the woods. Then he asked if I had seen anything. Well, I told him what I had seen, figuring he would tease me about it, but he didn't. He made a solemn face and he said, "Oh, it's just him again." He proceeded to tell me of the reports and incidents that he had been involved in and that from time to time our mutual friend would come out and cause some mischief. Years later, I started really trying to learn about them. One of your videos mentioned an encounter about 4 miles as the crow flies from where I had mine, and another channel talked about a sighting 6 miles away from me. I guess my friend has been making the rounds. In the 1960s, we lived in the city of Pittsburgh on a hill that was undermined with old mine shafts. I was 12 years old and running from the woods nearby to go home and eat supper. You got into big trouble if you missed supper in my home, so I ran up the trail as fast as I could get there. I was running and I saw something move to my right, not that far off the trail. I stopped in my tracks when I saw it, and for a minute or two, I found myself playing a silly game with a 7-foot-tall brown and red-haired creature. It was a Bigfoot. I had never in my life seen anything like this. At that time, Frankenstein and the werewolf were the only scary things I knew about. He would slide behind a tree and look from one side and then to the other, peeking at me as I moved forward back to see him and watch what he was doing. At one point, I decided that I'd had enough, and I ran like hell out of there. I never said a word to my mother or my father about it either. Only recently did I tell my wife of 54 years. And then 2 short years ago, I was golfing at Whitewater Creek in Fayetteville, Georgia. It was mid-December and most of the leaves had fallen off the trees. 2 golf carts pulled up to the number 16 tee box, which was beside 2 ponds. We started getting out when my buddy next to me shouted, "Hey Dave, there's Bigfoot!" We looked across the pond into the woods and sure enough, we saw something massive and black walking through the trees not 60 feet from us. Well, I couldn't see all of it, but enough to know what we were looking at. My buddy and I turned the cart around and drove to the edge of the woods where the thing had walked. And when I pulled up to the edge of the trees, we saw the thing walking right toward us. My buddy slapped my leg, shouting, "Let's get out of here!" But I wasn't ready to go, and I shouted and I whistled at the thing, and then I watched him walk off and go back the way he came. The sun hit its back for a few seconds, and I could see its jet black fur and its massive arm and shoulder and part of its head. We watched it go over the little hill and out of sight toward Whitewater Creek. And when my buddy and I got back to the others, we opened a beer and did not talk about what we had seen. And it wasn't until 2 years later that my friend spoke about it again. He said it looked like a big black 55-gallon oil drum walking on 2 legs. During the summertime, the woods are so thick with leaves that you can't see 5 feet through the trees and bushes. But I'm sure it's still out there, though, and that we got lucky to see it when we did. I once met a young lady from an Indigenous tribe in British Columbia. Her grandmother lived in Victoria and had a big house with a deck and a fenced-in yard. On the other side of the fence was forest land, and Bigfoot was well known to be all around that area. She used to babysit her nieces and nephews at her grandma's house. While she was there, she could hear the Bigfoot's wood claps and chatter and screams, and she could see them interacting with each other inside the trees. Whenever Bigfoot was around, she and the children were not allowed outside because they were not allowed to disturb them. She was raised to believe that Bigfoot are keepers of the land, and she was taught that if she didn't bother them, the Bigfoot families would not bother her. Whenever the creatures got spooked by a nearby human, the mama Bigfoot would tell the little ones to hide, while she and the others saddled up next to the trees and blended into the surroundings. One time, she was watching a group of Bigfoots on the other side of the fence when something in the woods alerted them. She watched them quickly hide among the trees, each of them planted so perfectly that it was hard to tell they were even there. That conversation has stayed with me all these years. I found it fascinating how calm and comfortable she was talking about them, about the forest neighbors she coexisted with so peacefully. She said she wasn't allowed to tell anyone where her grandma lived, otherwise people would come out to bother them. Thank you for all you do. I love and appreciate your channel. Signed, Marcy. I am a lifelong resident of Ross County, Ohio. My first sighting of a Bigfoot came in 1999 when I was 11 years old. My family and I were in the car returning home from Illinois after visiting my aunt and uncle for Thanksgiving. I remember staring out of my window and looking into the trees when I saw something furry and tall and black walking through the thicket. I probably saw it for 6 seconds, but it felt like an eternity watching this thing ambling along like it didn't have a care in the whole world. I blurted out, "I saw a Bigfoot, just like Harry and the Hendersons. I saw one right now in the woods." Well, my mom gave me a weird look, and my sister did somewhat the same, and she called me a dork. Dad said something like, "That's malarkey, Fred. Bigfoot isn't real." Well, I protested, and I doubled down, but my dad said it was probably a local guy wearing a big coat out there, and then I let it go since I knew none of them believed me anyway. And then we come to April of 2021. My parents own a few acres of land not far from the family house. In the middle of that land is a small cabin surrounded by trees. My family members have used the cabin over the years for various things like parties and celebrations, and as a place to hunt for deer during the season. One time, on a visit to the cabin, I was in the process of unloading my Jeep when I saw something standing just 15 feet from me, and it was closely observing what I was doing. It had reddish fur, 4 inches long. I think it was a juvenile Bigfoot. It cautiously approached me until we were 10 feet apart. It was only 5 feet tall, and it smelled like a dog that had never had a bath in its life. When it was closer, I could see it wasn't a juvenile Bigfoot after all. It had very human-looking like features, not like that of a gorilla or a primate. His nose was a lot like mine, albeit a little broader, and his lips were like a person's. It had a short neck and long arms, and its hands hung down past its knees. While diminutive in stature, it was wide and muscular everywhere nonetheless. And then I saw that it was missing an ear, looked like it had been torn off. He had a large scar that started under his right eye and it ran down over his lips. The scar continued downward and then hooked right, giving it an L shape. Something or someone had clearly harmed this creature. My final thought was that he was a Bigfoot with some type of dwarfism. And I wasn't scared. I didn't feel threatened or intimidated by him. I think he was just curious and wanted to investigate. He stood there and he tilted his head sideways at me. And he gave me a big dopey goofy smile, grinning at me like we were friends and he'd known me his entire life. He turned around and walked back toward the forest. Then he smiled at me one more time, and he went into the woods, and then he was out of sight. The next morning, I had just sat down for my breakfast when I noticed he had returned. He was looking in the window and smiling that dopey smile at me once again. He looked at my breakfast, and he licked his lips like he was hungry. So I took my plate carefully and opened the front door and walked outside. I returned his smile and placed the food on the porch and took 2 steps back. He looked down at the food and back up at me like he was saying, "Is this for me?" I maintained my smile as he picked up the plate and turned around and went back into the woods. Just like the day before, he smiled at me again and then he disappeared. Later that evening, I went out to the Jeep and I placed some fruit and cheese and chocolate on the hood. When I peeked out almost an hour later, all of that was gone. The next day, he didn't show up when I was having breakfast. I ate and I went outside, and then I noticed some items on the hood of my Jeep where I'd left the food for him. There were 3 polished blue rocks, a large flint arrowhead, a Susan B. Anthony dollar coin, a torn Canadian $20 bill with bite marks on it, and a pine cone, and the head and arm of a Barbie doll. The night before I went back home, I saw 2 triangle-shaped UFOs silently floating near the cabin. They moved up around each other as though they were dancing. And when I took a couple of steps off the porch for a better view, they stopped in midair as though they had noticed me. After a few seconds, they shot straight up into the sky and they were gone. I don't know if they had anything to do with Bigfoot, but it felt like more than just a coincidence. I never did see that Bigfoot again, but my wish is that wherever he is, he's well. As a man coming from a family of non-believers, thank you for letting me get this off of my chest. He signs Fred. This is a story about an evil spirit. Let's see what the writer has to say. I was attending the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. And on weekends, when I wasn't working or loaded with homework, I would head up into the Wasatch Mountains to fish, camp, or hike around the many lakes. The skies at night were absolutely amazing, and I would stargaze for hours, watching the comets and finding constellations. I loved seeing the wildlife roaming, and I never got tired of being surrounded by the peace and solitude of nature. I love the evergreens and the aspen trees and the colors of the evening and dawn that seem to be painted in the sky. It's a gorgeous country up there. On one summer night, I went fishing with one of my buddies. We had a great spot on the river to catch rainbow trout, which always taste amazing over a campfire. After dinner, we went to an overlook to watch the animals that would pass by lower in the valley. We didn't need flashlights. The moon was full and so bright that we could see our shadows. Well, we were sitting on the front of his car and talking about school and work and fish and life in general. After about an hour, I felt the creepy sensation that something was watching me. I knew we were alone out there, so I thought it might be in my head, and I said nothing to my friend. But then a few minutes later, the feeling became gradually more intense and dark. I felt a vibe that can only be described as evil, angry, mocking, pure evil. Whoever or whatever it was, I could feel it standing just away from the back of the car. "There's something really scary going on. Someone's behind us," I quietly told my friend. He just looked at me and shrugged. "Oh yeah? I know. I see him a lot." If I hadn't been in a state of near panic at that point and had been able to think straight, I would have tossed my friend down the mountain and left without him. "What?" I asked him in pure confusion and panic. "You know?" "We need to go now," I said. I slid off the hood of the car and got inside, careful not to look up and back toward the trunk. But my friend took his time getting in and started the car and slowly drove off. All the while I was next to him, shouting for him to hit the gas and get us the hell out of there. My heart was racing, my hands were shaking, and my face felt hot. It was sheer terror. I had never experienced fear like this before, and I'm happy to have not have felt it since. The further away we drove, the calmer I felt. Whatever it was, it had stayed behind. Once I calmed down a bit, I asked my friend how long he had known that evil spirit had been there, and why it was there, and why in the world didn't we leave as soon as he knew what was going on. He told me that he was used to it and actually described what the spirit looked like. When I got home, I prayed like there was no tomorrow that this thing would stay away from me. I eventually distanced myself from my friend after he told me about numerous dark experiences he had had and that he had no intention of ridding himself of the sources of evil. There's most definitely good versus evil and light versus dark in this world that we don't usually see. But if we're sensitive enough, we can certainly feel it. I was never into the occult or Ouija boards or anything like that. I never dabbled in activities seeking out the darkness because I didn't want to find it. Now that I'm married and I have kids, I warn my family of the dangers that are lightly hidden there just beyond our perception. Although this happened to me many years ago, unfortunately, I'll never forget a second of the encounter or the feelings that came with it. Okay, I'm going to bring up an archive story, just one for this podcast. But if you're skipping these archived stories, I would encourage you to listen to this one to get a little taste of how good these stories are that I was doing 5 or 6 years ago. They're just as good as the stories I do now, but some of them had a particular twist or a bit of humor in them or something unusual that you don't hear much in these creature type circles. But I think you'll enjoy this archive if you'll just listen in. I think it's about 15, 16 minutes long, but if you've heard it before, it's probably worth listening again. So I hope you enjoy it. So here's an archived story I did in a podcast 5 years ago. This encounter took place in Maryland back in the summer of 1962. The knowledge of a Bigfoot creature was not common, and I never knew of their existence. Then this one special eventful day, my interaction with a strange creature was forever embedded deeply within my memories. It was not until years later that I learned exactly what it was that I had seen. Before getting into the details of my encounter, I want to give you a better picture of the environment as it was back in 1962. If you walked to the eastern end of the road that I lived on and made a left, you would be on a road going north that would dead end to the woods and continued north into the woods to a trail. The woods was about a mile wide north and south and many miles long east and west. By following the river, you would be able to enter the Patapsco Valley State Park completely indiscreet. Guys, I'm sorry about my pronunciation. The United States has chosen some of the weirdest names to give places, but they're probably good names. I just can't pronounce them, and you just got to deal with that. Proceeding down the trail about a half a mile into the woods, you had three choices. If you went to the right, you would run into a lake or swamp combo that was completely overrun by nature, making it difficult for most people to venture around the perimeter. My friends and I were probably the only teens that did this occasionally. It was worth the thrashing that we would have to endure by the weeds and thorns because you always ran into many animals, birds, reptiles, and other wildlife. Well, now back to the trail. My encounter took place in the early morning during the month of June in 1962, and I was 12 and a half years old. My closest friend and I would terrorize everything in the swamp and woods every day of our summer vacation, and after school hours when it was in season. We could not get enough of it. We had become very proficient with our air rifles, able to hit dragonflies right out of the air while flying. This one particular morning in June, as I went to get my friend for our daily ritual, he sadly said in protest that he had to go somewhere with his mother that day. I did not let that stop me, however, and to make him feel even worse, I reassured him that I was still going. I knew the sight of just watching me walk off into the woods while he could not would really haunt him through the day with his mother. With a smile on my face, I went to the end of our road, made the left, and entered the woods after proceeding past the dead end. When I got to the split, I looked right and left, deciding which way needed me the most. The swimming pond wasn't any fun for the horror that I was about to unleash on the swamp inhabitants, so I went to the left. I climbed up the embankment across the flat area and down the other side to the swamp. I stood there several minutes at the edge of the swamp, but then I realized that something immediately seemed different. Surprisingly, I didn't see or hear any wildlife or any of the usual chatter of the birds. The more I paid attention to the silence, the more it raised my curiosity. And then I suddenly had the strongest feeling that I was being watched. I can't explain it, but it was something that made me feel very uneasy. I started looking around into the woods, but I didn't see anything. It was not until I turned around 180 degrees with my back to the swamp and looked at the embankment that I had just descended. There, about 40 yards away and hugging a good-sized tree from behind, was this huge, hairy creature standing on two legs. Its arms were around the tree and it was facing me, leaning out to its left side from its midsection, keeping its lower body behind the tree, just peering around and watching me. It was not doing a good job of hiding because it was much wider than the 16-inch wide tree, and from my point of view, there was about a foot of exposed chest and shoulder on its left side and maybe 2 feet of its mass on the exposed right side where its head was. I was immediately taking all of this in, realizing it was much taller than any man I had ever seen and unbelievably huge and muscular. The body was covered with long brownish-colored hair and only part of the upper chest and parts of the face were hairless. The head was big, and I thought to myself that the top of its large head looked like the end of a football. We stared at each other for what seemed like an eternity, and then for whatever brilliant reasoning on my part, in an attempt to scare it away, I raised my Sheridan Blue Streak air rifle, which was pumped to the max. I shot and hit the creature in the most exposed part of its chest, and to my amazement, it didn't even flinch. Not a good idea, I thought, but I knew that it had to hurt because I have to say that my Sheridan was one of, if not the most powerful air rifles available during that time, and it was able to pierce a metal milk can. If you've ever shot a BB or pellet rifle in the sunlight, you can sometimes see the sun reflecting on the projectile as it's being propelled to the target. This is what happened that day. I could see the pellet all the way until it hit the creature. Now, if once wasn't enough after seeing my shot had no effect on this creature, me and all my infinite teen knowledge that I could muster, I decided to shoot it again, and so I did. I saw the .20 caliber pellet hit in just about the same spot on its exposed chest. When I saw that this shot had no effect either, my immediate thought was, why in the heck did I just do that? Then, to show me that I was having the right thought, the creature stepped out from behind the tree, showing me just how massive he was, and also to imply, that didn't hurt a bit, boy. I now say descriptively he because when he stepped from behind the tree, my golf ball-sized eyes dropped from his head and chest and realized that it was definitely a male. I could not look away or believe what I was seeing. Was he offering me a new target? I quickly dismissed this thought because up to now he was not aggressive, and I knew that if I took that third shot at his newly revealed lower region, that this would end very badly for me. And I can see this kid going, should I shoot it or should I not? That was all that I needed because then I realized that I needed a good new plan fast. My first plan had failed of trying to get this thing to run away so I could get out of there by my same trail home that I had come in on. To make matters even worse, I think I only had succeeded in pissing this huge creature off, and just to be sure that I had accomplished that, and to be sure it was absolutely pissed off, I had shot it that second time. I avoided taking that tempting third shot, and my new plan was very simple: run like hell. I had only one other option as an avenue of escape, and that was to go into the woods to the north towards the swimming lake and get to that housing community on the other side. It was not a decision that I wanted to make, but under the circumstances, with the doubly shot, pissed off big hairy creature, I know what they say about running from an animal and being chased as prey. Despite this, I was out of options, so I immediately ran and lit up that trail and probably amazed that creature so much that if it was capable of thought, it was probably thinking, I never knew they could move that fast. I probably resemble the cartoon character the Roadrunner burning a trail out of there. I made that trip in record time even though it dumped me out miles away from home. I was happy, just happy, to again see people, and the fact that the creature did not chase me or retaliate for me giving it such a whipping. It probably just dismissed everything as it walked casually away and thought, what a stupid kid, and just decided to just leave me alone and probably shaking its head at our encounter as it departed, happy to have its own story to tell to its own family. But this story does not end here. When I safely got back home, I began rounding up some friends, and after several hours of convincing them that I was not crazy, 6 fearless or stupid teenage warriors went back to the woods equipped with air guns and baseball bats. Our scouring the woods by the swamp did not reveal the creature, and I was not disappointed because I was afraid it would still be hacked off at me, remembering that I was the one that shot it. During our search, we did find an obvious bedding area that was made from soft pine branches carefully arranged, and they were completely mashed down. The location of this bed was at the top of an embankment just off the trail that I had walked on to get to the swamp that morning. I think I had walked right past it. The creature may have been hiding, laying there sleeping, and seeing me, it was probably hiding and staying out of view. I don't know where it was and where it came from into the woods that morning, but the bed was in perfect strategic location to see the trails in the surrounding area. I've since moved to another state, but during a trip back to Maryland in 2015, I revisited that area. I parked my car where the woods once were, now a new subdivided housing parking lot which was built right next to that swamp, and on top of the now filled-in swimming lake which gave way to this project. I had a tear in my eye as I walked over to what was left of the swamp where my encounter took place, and which had occupied so much of my time as a typical young boy growing up. Only a small defiant and disrespected area of the swamp still remained, and only a hint of what it once was. It was now home to litter and discarded items unwanted by the housing community. I was completely shocked that with the addition of the new roads and all the lakes that had been filled in and built with this housing projects, woods cut, and the erection of 2 churches, 3 schools, and a library on that property, that this small area was still even there. Amazingly, that the exact spot where I had stood at the edge of the swamp that eventful day had survived for whatever reason despite all the human encroachment and development. I walked over to the remaining swamp and I stood in the exact spot at the edge of the swamp where I stood in 1962, and then I began turning the 180 degrees, not knowing what to expect or what I would see. I completed the turn the same as I had done that special day, and to my surprise, standing on that hill, there like a monument, was the same tree, but this time it was standing alone. As I looked at the tree, I got a cold chill and noticed that it was now a little wider around its midsection, but then again, so am I. You can use my story and my name. I have nothing to hide. I have remained an active hunter throughout my life and spent many, many hours in the woods gaining much respect for the animals and nature. Regrettably, I never saw anything like that again, though every day I regret shooting that Bigfoot and wish that I could have just thrown it an apple from my lunch bag instead. I respect the fact that this creature remained calm and did not retaliate for my poor decisions. And thank God that I did not take that 3rd shot. Thank you for listening to this podcast and listening this far. I really appreciate you. Just a reminder, I'm going to be at the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Conference in late July. I need to look up the date and put it in my calendar. I just hadn't had a minute to do it yet. And we're supposed to have stuff to sell there, and I don't have anything to sell. I think I've got about 3 weeks to order something and get it in so I can have stuff to sell at my booth. And I just hate that stuff. I don't know. I'm not a gadget t-shirt kind of salesperson. I don't know. I just don't like all that stuff. I don't want to sell you anything, but I'm supposed to have something there to sell. So I'm trying to find some t-shirts. The problem with t-shirts is you have to get every conceivable size, from kids to women to men to real big men to real big women. And you have to buy so much stuff that you don't sell it all and it costs you money. Well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to bring something to sell you. I won't make any money off of it. Anyway, all that to say, I'm going to be there, and I think I'm hosting a section of the conference where people actually get up and tell their stories. I need to contact the organizers of the event, ask them exactly what I'm supposed to do, because I don't know. I don't do this kind of stuff. They asked me to do it. They said they'd pay for my hotel room, which is the only thing that clicked me over into doing it, because every time I go to these conferences, it costs me a fortune because I have to buy all this junk to sell, and I don't sell half of it. Anyway, I know I'm kind of sounding like a Debbie Downer, but I don't know. I just don't like losing money. That's all it is. But maybe this one will work out. Heck, the hotels in that area are like $350 a night. How many t-shirts do you have to sell just to pay for that? Plus all your gas, time away from work, etc., etc. But I will enjoy being there. I think my son's coming with me. We're going to sit there together, and hopefully we'll get to see some people we've seen before and maybe meet some new people. Yeah, now I'm supposed to do a video to send to the organizers. I haven't done that yet. I'll probably do that today and send it to them. Anyway, I'll be at the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Conference in Gatlinburg. I want to say it's July the 20th, whatever the last Saturday in July is. It's a one-day deal. And so if you're going, you might want to if you don't live near there and you're going, it's a pretty good conference. I think they have some great speakers. There's all kind of booths there where people are selling stuff, books and little gadgets and stuff like that. So when you come by my booth, I'll be standing there with some little cheapy t-shirts and not a very extravagant booth, but I'll be there. I'd love to see you and say hi. So y'all come out if you can. I don't know how much it costs. I don't know what day it's on, but just do a Google search or some kind of search on Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Conference, Gatlinburg, Tennessee. It'll pop right up there at the top. All right, thanks again for listening to the podcast, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks.